topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome to the Ask the Expert show on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV, where we bring you educational information from top local experts in the fields of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. Now sit back and listen to experts in family law, association law, hearing loss, business brokers, home care, along with many other topics. Now here are your hosts, Steve-O and Sophia.
Hey, good afternoon, Houston. Welcome to another Ask the Expert show where we bring you the top experts in the field of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. Hey, for all you doubters out there who send us emails in all the time and ask if we ever read them, actually, I read every single email myself. And for about the last year, we've had your letters coming in saying, how come you don't do like a community association show, a show for HOA Condo Association? And to be honest with you, we did not have any openings. So we ended up adding another hour to the show. And that was the first thing I did is I searched out for a top legal firm that works with HOA and Condo Association. We found one of the top law firms in the city of Houston. This is their first show. It's Lang and Associates. Let me introduce you to our new experts, Attorney Shannon Lane and Attorney Jessica Hughes. Good afternoon, ladies.
Hi, Steve. Thanks so much for having us. We're thrilled to be here.
It seems like we've been working on this forever, and it's finally here. And I've worked with your great assistant, Ashley, and she helped put this together. And I can't tell you, I'm so excited because we do a HOA Condo Association show in Florida, which has been running for the last 10 years. And I wanted to get this time of show on in Houston so bad. So let's talk about the firm first. Tell us about Lang and Associates.
Sure. We're a small firm based out of Houston. We've been running since 2016. My background is a traditional big law background. I went to the University of Virginia, clerked for a federal judge, did work for an international law firm for many years before coming to Houston and eventually opening the firm. So what we're thrilled to bring to the table is real litigation experience and expertise. While our focus is on HOAs and condos, we do still do commercial work, which means that we're in court, we're in front of judges, we're arguing, we're trying cases. And that means that for our clients that have real issues, a problem with a management company or a vendor or unhinged homeowners who sue them over crazy things, which is really all we do all day, we're really able to advise as to what we think a local court would do, what a jury would do, and where we are best able to allocate resources to help our associations. With our association practice, we've got dozens, if not hundreds, of clients covering the gamut from very small, 10 home communities up to 4,000 home communities, condos, subdivisions, all over the Houston area and even into the Hill Country. So we continue to grow. We've got a great team of assistants and paralegals. You mentioned Ashley. Ashley's a former property manager for an HOA management company, and so she has tremendous knowledge and expertise that she brings to bear as well. So we're really happy to be here and to talk to some of your listeners.
One of the things I've learned about your practice is that customer service is so important. And I got to tell you, just I guess we've been working with this for the last couple of weeks with Ashley. I can tell that customer service is so important to your firm.
It really is. And we make sure to tell everybody that when we're interviewing. One thing you'll get with our firm is somebody's going to answer the phone. You are not going to go through a phone tree. You're not going to get screened. You're going to hear one of the women in my office, we're all women, will answer the phone and answer your question. And we also have a lot of stability here. So for homeowners who end up in our office because of an assessment or a deed restriction issue, they're not going to have to repeat their story every time they call. We know who they are. We're going to work with them. And our view is that we want to support the boards. While we represent the association, we don't represent a board member. We think associations run better if people in the community have faith in their boards and have faith in the people that the boards hire. And so for us, being friendly and kind, but still holding the line and following the law is really important. And we think you can do that without being surly or dismissive to homeowners. Because for every homeowner that just doesn't pay their bills or just won't maintain their home, there's a homeowner who has cancer or who lost their job or who just lost a spouse. And for us to be unpleasant about that helps nobody. It is very important to us to be kind to people, especially if this is their homes. We do not throw people out of their homes lightly, ever.
So what we're going to be doing is today I've got so many questions for you. In the future, we ask you to send your questions in. Here's your chance at the meter won't be running, so to say. You can ask your free questions. We've got two of the greatest experts that are going to be with us every month. And so today I'm going to start off with some questions that we know that people are going to have, but in the future, we always promote our show on iHeart and Spotify and YouTube and Facebook. You will be able to send me directly at, take this down, 954-336-3767. You can text me your questions. We also have a chat line that we use a lot, and you can ask your questions during the show. We'll try to get to those. But today we're just going to go over our first show with doing kind of basic questions. So if a person lives in a townhouse, what rules apply to them?
We get this question a lot. People think that if they're in a townhouse, that means something. And what we explain is that a townhouse is an architectural style. They're very common in Houston. They tend to be 3 stories high on a fairly small footprint. But what we can't tell you just based on whether you live in a townhouse is whether you're in a subdivision or a condominium. And those are your options here if you're in a deed restricted community with an association. For a subdivision, you're going to be largely responsible for everything for your home, from foundation to roof. For a condominium, there's going to be shared ownership of those structures, and the association will have a lot of obligations for maintenance and repair. But just saying I live in a townhouse won't tell us one way or another what that means. And so we always have to ask more questions, and see the declaration and look at the documents to determine, in fact, whether the association has to repair your roof or whether you have to repair your roof. A lot of times we'll get a good sense of what that is based on the assessments, because condominium assessments tend to be substantially higher than subdivision assessments because of all of the obligations that an association for a condominium has that a subdivision doesn't. So for us, townhouse is like, well, sure, you live inside the Loop in Houston. Tons of people live in townhouses. That doesn't tell us anything.
We just got our first text, and listen, we ask all the questions that come in. And they want to know, they said, it's about time a show like this has been put on. Thank you so much. I want to know, why are our fees always going up?
Sure.
We're not afraid to ask, are we?
And we can tell you, if you live in a subdivision, your fees are probably going up a little bit just to account for changes in the broader economy. In fact, we generally recommend that at a minimum, assessments go up with the rate of inflation every year. But in the Houston and Gulf Coast area in particular, what's really driving assessments from our perspective for subdivisions and particularly for condos is insurance. The insurance market here is super disruptive, much like it is in Florida. There's very few carriers who are providing HOA insurance, and even fewer are providing property insurance for condominiums, and the cost is really high. So for subdivisions, you're likely seeing increases because insurance in part, but just the general increases in cost to maintain and repair things in your community. Gate labor is up, gate supplies are up. Wood is more expensive. Everything's more expensive. Pool supplies are more expensive. But for a condo, what you're really going to be seeing driving your assessments at this point is insurance. And it's not unusual at all for us to see insurance rates for smaller communities, 50 to 100 units, well exceeding $100,000 or even $200,000 a year in premium. And so if you're 100 people and that alone is a bill you have to pay, you're going to see that reflected in your assessments. The other thing we see that really drives assessment rates for condominiums is that for a lot of older buildings, units that have been around for 40 or 50 years, there hasn't been a real push to increase assessments and a lot of kicking the can down the road when it comes to the big maintenance needs. And, as you probably know, your roof has a limited lifespan. The moisture barriers in your walls have a limited lifespan. The cladding on the outside has a limited lifespan. And so when you get to the 40 and 50 year mark, everything really starts to fall apart. And if you haven't maintained high enough assessments and maintained a good reserve fund, then suddenly we do see owners saddled with really big increases because we have to keep the buildings standing. We have to keep them insured. So, that drives a lot of it. But what we recommend to everybody who calls about that is go to the meetings, look at the financials. You're entitled to financial information. We do hear often, sadly, that there's not a lot of transparency with the association. And,
Yes.
to the extent they need better management or a law firm, we're happy to talk to a board and explain what they need to do. Because we do think it's important that owners always see where the money is going. There's this knee-jerk reaction to say someone is stealing. And for all of the clients we've dealt with, we've only seen theft a few times. And when we do, it's really obvious.
Or for the board. We love to tell owners that.
Yeah.
If you don't like the way things are being handled, you can run and be elected.
Yes.
But
run for the board. And that's the one we hear all the time. We're like, if you want to change things, run for the board. And generally we're told, oh my God, I don't want to do that. You have to do that. I'm on my HOA board. It's sometimes thankless, but it can be very rewarding and we strongly recommend it.
One thing you'll learn when you see me looking to the left, I'm looking at my cell phone because we're getting text during the show. It's funny, it's kind of, this question is really good, what we're talking about. This is Robert in Memorial. He wants to know, if board members were paid, do you think the quality of board members would be better? I bet he's a board member.
I don't think so. It's hard to say. I suppose if you thought you could get better quality, I would not recommend it as a paid position because I do think that once money's involved, it really kind of influences where people are, what their thoughts are and their motivations. Honestly, the real challenge that we see is just getting anyone to run. I suppose to the extent that, you throw money at somebody, maybe you can get them on the board, you get more candidates, but I don't know that you would get better quality. In our experience, where you get a really solid, strong board is when they're surrounded by really good supporters and good managers who are really paying attention and guiding. We try to help as much as we can as well. And for our communities that are very in touch with us, and lots of our board members have my cell phone and we text, and I'm on lots of group texts with boards. I think they've got good experiences because they're getting really direct advice. I don't know that paying them, and then I think the related issue would be kind of leaving them to their own devices, would necessarily increase how well things are run. For us, a lot of this just comes down to corporate governance and explaining to folks kind of what you can and can't do and directing them. We get calls all the time from people who don't even know where to start when it comes to insuring and maintaining and fixing, and we can help with all of those things. So I guess that's a long way of saying, maybe, but man, that would really upend things. And if you don't like paying assessments now, you're really going to hate paying 3, 5, or 7 salaries. It would be.
Hey, we've got a very intelligent audience. Most of them are belong in this or in the association or their board members. So we're going to be getting all kinds of questions. Like if you're on an HOA board and you want to find people who break the rules, how do you go about doing that?
Sure, we get that question a lot.
Yes.
So Texas has addressed this, the legislature in recent years. We see a lot of changes in HOA law with most of the legislative sessions. And right now, what you need to do to fine is have the power to fine in your governing documents. So the first thing we do is we go and look in those declarations, sometimes the bylaws, and see if it says these may be enforced by fines or a word like fines. If you've got that power, then what you have to do under Texas law is have a written and recorded fine policy that sets forth categories of infractions for which a fine can be assessed and then the amount of the fine. What we generally wrap into those policies are the pre-fine notice requirements that are also required. So for most violations, those that are capable of being cured and not an immediate threat to health and safety, an HOA is required to provide written notice and an opportunity for the owner to cure before they can be fined. So there's a whole process, and we can easily walk our clients through what to do. But what you can't do, unfortunately, is just fine. You've got to have all these other things in place. For those communities that don't have the power to issue fines, we talk to them about the likelihood of being able to amend those documents to provide for that power. Because generally, we think that a reasonable fine can be far more effective to cleaning up a community than having to refer everything to a law firm. If a $25 fine gets somebody to power wash their house, I think that's more effective than a $1,000 lawsuit. And so while I'm working against my own interests here, I do think that to the extent we can get people into a reasonable situation where you can get compliance through small dollars, it's better for your community overall. But you have to have that power, and a lot of them don't.
So in Florida, some of the biggest questions that we get, and I'd like to hear about, laws you have in Texas, is support animals.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God, you would not believe how many people write us about support animals.
Sure.
What do you get those kind of questions also?
We do. So, the support animal stuff is really governed by federal law more than anything. And where we have to explain to people what they're subject to is the folks that come in and say, well, I've got a disability, so I'm subject to the Americans with Disabilities Act, and you have to do these things. Well, the ADA is not going to apply to most subdivisions and most condos because they're not public entities. They're private, which means that you're subject to the Fair Housing Act. And what the Fair Housing Act is going to require is that an association make reasonable accommodations to the actual or perceived disability of a resident, not just an owner, but a resident. And that's very fact specific. When it comes to animals, some of it's fairly obvious. You should never tell somebody they can't have a seeing eye dog or a support animal that, for an actual disability. Where we run into issues is the emotional support animal argument. Those are not difficult designations to get. You can go online and register your animal as an emotional support animal really without doing anything. And in those cases, we have to take kind of a more searching analysis as to what's going on in the community, what the animal is. And the question we always ask is, how important is this really to you as a community? Is this the hill you want to die on? And if so, why? And in some cases, they have very good arguments for why these animals are a problem. And a lot of times they don't. And so we try to start there and engage in this interactive process of identifying reasonable accommodations. And because it's so fact specific, I wouldn't just say, if someone says it's a support animal, you have to have them. If someone says they have a disability, you have to give them whatever they want. That's certainly not the case. But what is the case is when an owner says, I need this animal for this reason, you can't ignore it. And at that point, we always recommend engaging with attorneys because it is so fact specific and the ramifications can be, fairly substantial if you don't do it right. But the key is reasonableness. And so that, again, requires us to look at the community and what's going on. One thing we should point out is if an animal is allowed, they still have to follow rules. So yes, maybe you need an animal for your disability, but we can't think of any disability that would mean that your animal shouldn't be under your, leash control and picked up after when they do their business. And that's often what prompts calls to us, is somebody's got what they call a support animal, but they're not really taking care of it. The rules still apply.
So on an HOA, what do you tell people who say they never get to vote on maintenance or other issues? Is there a reason for that?
For sure. And we hear this a lot too. We get lots of calls from homeowners who say, I don't like what the board is doing and nobody ever asked me. And, we tell them, your HOA board is a lot like Congress. We go, we vote for our representatives, but they don't come to us and ask us what we think about every issue that comes before us. We trust them, or are forced to trust them, to make the decisions that are, they think are in the best interest of the constituency. And that's the case with a homeowners association. What members generally get to vote for are their directors. And also vote to amend the deed restrictions and to dissolve altogether. Those are really the only things you vote for. And so that goes back to what Jessica had said earlier, run for the board, because that's how you get to have real power. You're not going to be asked, should we do this, do that? Should we spend this money? Who votes on the budget? That's all a board decision. And so you just don't have those types of votes. What you get to do is vote for who represents you. And I would say 201, we almost never see competitive elections. So we always encourage people to run. It's really not as bad as people think it is. You end up meeting a lot of your neighbors. You have real good decision-making authority. You learn so much. And we find most people find it pretty rewarding. But for the day-to-day stuff, members don't have a vote. They don't. They can certainly express opinions. We encourage that. But beyond that, they just have to wait for the next election.
Here's Jake. Jake wants to know how important is your background if you decide you want to run for a board member? Do you have to have a certain type of experience?
Not at all. In Texas, any member of an HOA has the right to run for the board. For a condo, the condo can set forth more rules than a subdivision can. So in that regard, look in your governing documents. But generally speaking, anyone can run. For a subdivision, the only barrier to run is that you haven't been convicted of a felony or a crime of moral turpitude in the last, I want to say, 20 years. But no, there's no special requirements or background. And, this goes back to what we said about the best run communities we see have a strong support team. They have a good manager, they have law firm that will help guide the owners. The other thing they can do is they can always get involved in the Community Associations Institute, which is the national trade organization for HOAs that offers a lot of educational opportunities for board members. For us, in my opinion, the best board members are the ones that want to be there. That's really it. You want to be there, you're interested and engaged, you want to hear the issues, and then you make a decision. We don't have a vote, the managers don't have a vote, but we want someone to vote. And so for us, it's really just a desire to be there is really all you need. If you come to a board with construction background or management experience, that's great, but it's by no means a requirement. Again, for us, what we see is when people are out campaigning, just the fact that they want to be there makes a huge difference.
We have been scrolling your contact information, but for all the people who are listening on iHeart and Spotify and Pandora, Facebook, tell people how they can reach your office.
Absolutely. You can call us anytime. Our number is scrolling on the screen. We have a website, shannonlanglaw.com. As I said at the beginning, we answer the phone. So if you call, you'll probably hear from Mackenzie or Ashley, our paralegals, and they will happily chat with anyone who's got questions. We're always happy to talk to people. Always happy to talk to board members, managers, anyone who's interested and needs some legal help. We answer the phone. I say that because so many law firms don't. I
got to tell you, you guys have done such a good, this is your first show. I'm actually surprised about how many texts we've gotten from your first show. This is going to be a winning show. You're going to be back with us next month. If you missed any part of the show, you can go to iHeart's podcast. You can go to Spotify, all under Ask the Experts Houston, HOA Condo Association. Ladies, I can't wait for our next show. I know what the future looks like because, like I said, we've been doing our Florida show for 10 years now, and I know this is going to be another winner. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful and blessed weekend. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
That is the Lang Associates and Associates law firm. I am so glad we've got a community association law firm now for Houston. Hey, that's it for us today. We'll have another show coming up right after this one. Thank you, Juan. We'll be right back.
Thanks for tuning in today to the Ask the Expert show on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV. Tune in next week and every week to hear more from our experts on personal injury, insurance, air condition repairs, estate planning, Medicare, and many other topics in the areas of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. See you next week.